All right, guys. So this is going to be the second lecture for the endocrine system. This is going to cover a little bit about the hypothalamus as well as the pituitary gland. So we'll kind of jump into this one. All right. So again, this is just kind of an overview of all the major endocrine organs. So we're really only talking about these two up here at the very top, hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, which is associated with the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland are responsible for a lot of hormones. There's 6 in total. So you have what's called growth hormone, which is GH. That's responsible for growth of both bones and muscles. You have another one which is referred to as prolactin, or PRL, which is responsible for stimulation of the mammary glands to produce milk. The follicle stimulating hormones so there's 2 that actually stimulate the testes and ovaries. One is called the follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH, and then there's another one called the luteinizing hormone, or LH. We'll go over these in just a second. There's the tropic hormone, which is TSH, associated with the thyroid, and then there's the adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH, which is associated with the adrenal cortex stimulation. All right. Pituitary itself is about the size of a grape. It hangs off of the front of the hypothalamus. We normally kind of go through things. We talk a little bit about the skeletal system way ahead of time. So we've already talked a little bit about this thing called in the sphenoid bone. So there's this little pocket in the sphenoid bone called the sella trucica. It's in the posterior or bottom floor of the skull. It's part of this bone referred to as the sphenoid bone that looks like a butterfly that stretches out across the back parts of our eyes. And that's where the hypothalamus actually sits in there. Okay, so hopefully when we get back, we can kind of take a little bit of a look at those. There's 2 functions and 2 lobes. So the anterior pituitary is mostly glandular tissue. So this is the part of the pituitary that's secreting most of our hormones. And the posterior pituitary is primarily nervous tissue. All right. So the hypothalamus actually secretes 2 hormones that regulate the pituitary gland. One is a releasing hormone, the other is an inhibiting hormone. So the releasing hormone tells the pituitary gland to start releasing its hormones. The inhibiting hormone, just like it sounds, it tells it to stop. So one's the gas and one is the brake. So when we look at it in terms of which part of the pituitary gland is most associated with the hypothalamus, it's actually the anterior pituitary, because these 2 hormones are interacting with that anterior pituitary, which is sometimes the reason why it makes it really difficult to decide what the problem is with, or issue can be with people who have problems with their pituitary gland. Right? Is it actually the hypothalamus that's having issues? Is there a tumor, or is there a problem, or has there been damage to this area of the brain? Or is there a tumor, or again, is there a problem or damage to this part of the pituitary gland? So we have to kind of decide which one is which. There are 6, like I was saying, hormones that are associated with the pituitary gland. 2 of them actually affect non-endocrine targets. We'll talk a little bit about those here in just a second. And 4 of them stimulate other endocrines to secrete their hormones. The characteristics of all of the anterior pituitary glands, they are primarily protein-based or peptide-based. All right, so they all act through secondary messenger systems. So they're going to attach themselves to those cells and then cause those cells to produce what they're supposed to be producing. And they're all primarily regulated by hormonal stimulation. All right, so they're mostly negative feedback systems. So they're looking for those specific hormones from either the the hypothalamus to cause them to go. The first of those hormones that we're going to talk a little bit about is the growth hormone, or GH. Okay, this one is associated with metabolism. People that have issues with metabolism, either high or low metabolism, sometimes this could be one of the issues with, or some of the problems with it. All right, they primarily affect both the growth and development of skeletal muscle as well as long bones in the body. So if growth hormone a lot of times is something that's associated with steroids most often. So people who are trying to gain muscle size are actually injecting an artificial type of growth hormone into their body. Now, if their long bones have stopped growing at that point, they're just going to simply add on muscle mass as well as bone density, but they won't add any height to them. If you have an individual who is abnormally short, and their long bones haven't stopped growing, we can artificially give them this growth hormone that can cause them to become taller. All right, but again, we have to kind of decide when that is given. All of these guys cause amino acids to start to build up to make proteins that's associated specifically with muscle tissue, and they can also cause fats to be broken down as a source of energy. So if somebody is really really skinny and they eat like crazy and we can't figure it out, it could be an issue that they're overproducing this growth hormone, because now they just can't put on any body fat, because it's being broken down for energy at those points. Okay. All right, a couple of the other hormones. So prolactin, this one is actually stimulates and maintains milk production after childbirth. All right, we really don't know what function it has in males, but males do produce that hormone. Adrenocorticotropic hormones, or the ACTH, is regulating the endocrine activity of the adrenal cortex, so the outer portion of the adrenal glands. And then the thyroid stimulating hormone is influencing growth and activity of the thyroid. So people that end up with enlarged thyroids, again, we could sometimes look back at the pituitary gland's hormone to see if that's what's actually causing that increase in the thyroid. Gonadotropic hormones, there are two of them, all right, and they're designed to simply just regulate activities of the gonads, either testes or ovaries. So the first of those is the follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH. All right, this one is going to stimulate in women the development of ovaries. So it's going to cause the ovaries to start to develop within the body. And it will also cause the stimulation of sperm development in the testes. Okay, so that's what it's doing here. It's causing the development of those two structures. The other one is the luteinizing hormone. So this is the one that actually triggers ovulation. It causes the ovary to cause a follicle, or essentially an egg cell, to rupture and become this what we call corpus luteum. In males, it stimulates the testosterone production. Okay. A little bit more about luteinizing hormone. This one most often is the one that's being either suppressed with birth control, because again, that would not allow the trigger of that ovary to happen. Okay. So a couple other ones. So oxytocin is another hormone secreted by the posterior pituitary. This one is actually involved in child labor. It stimulates that production. So the oxytocin is actually triggered by the fetus itself. So once the baby has gotten to a certain size, the baby starts to secrete its own hormones, and the oxytocin is one of those that gets picked up and triggered by the pituitary gland. It also aids as well in milk production. The other one is then what's referred to in the last one here is the antidiuretic hormone, or ADH. It's also known as vasopressin, because what it does is it actually can inhibit urine production. So essentially what this does is it allows the body to reabsorb more water. So it causes vasoconstriction, leading to an increase in blood pressure. So what we can do is, this is an artificial version of it, this vasopressin. So if somebody has a really low blood pressure, we can actually inject vasopressin directly into an IV and cause an increase in blood pressure pretty much immediately. Not only because of the vasoconstriction, but also because it's an antidiuretic. So it's causing the kidneys to absorb more water back into the bloodstream, which more volume would increase our blood pressure as well. Okay. This just is a little bit of a look at kind of what goes on. So this is the posterior pituitary here. All right. We just have a couple of different things. So ADH is one of those that's being secreted by the posterior pituitary. It's actually not being secreted by the posterior pituitary. It's made in the anterior pituitary and stored in the posterior pituitary. And same thing with oxytocin. It's actually stored there as well. They're not actually produced in those organs. Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and stop there for the pituitary gland itself. Tomorrow, we'll cover a little bit of some of the conditions that can happen when those hormones have issues.